Who's next?
Oh, I want to talk to Andy.
Oh.
Because we know Andy. Andy was on other shows, and I think we have a pretty good relationship with this person. Andy, welcome to the show.
Hey guys.
Hey.
How's it going?
It's going well. How are you?
Andy,
doing good.
Andy,
calling, congratulate you guys on the new show.
Thank you. Just Andy should be fine.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. We're super excited, and we're super excited to have callers who are kind of already repeat callers because we know them already, and we've established a little bit of a rapport. So, Andy, I'm super curious. What do you have to talk with us about today?
So it's kind of touching on a topic that you guys had a conversation about last week with an individual named, I guess, Justin, I think his name might have been.
Yes.
Obviously, the topic is veganism, and I just kind of wanted to come in with, I guess, a Christian perspective on this, because it seemed like a point that Eric brought up when I was listening to that conversation is that maybe not all the way, but in some sense, there seems to be this holdover in programming, I would say, from days as a Christian that, and Eric, correct me if I'm just completely misunderstanding this, but there was a sort of holdover in programming in the sense that when you were a Christian, you were told that, we're given stewardship by God over the land and over the animals.
Yeah. That's right there in Genesis.
That's something you're still kind of trying to, I guess, part with. Yeah.
Well, so the thing is, I'm not necessarily against, the conclusion. I'm against the reasoning that gets you there. And so while I have, I've been working through this, there is still, I feel, some influence in there that I still need to work through, and I'm trying. But that when you get hardwired from a young age into that it kind of sticks with you.
Sure. Yeah. I completely understand.
Andy.
I
What's okay? Really, really quick. You know what's funny? You're on the other side of things, right? You're a Christian.
Yes.
Okay, we're atheists, and we're discussing this in a civil way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so.
So you're in Texas, right?
I am. Yeah.
I bet you a beer that if we go into the comments under the video for this clip, people will not be as civil as you and I. Are you up for taking that bet?
I tell you what. I think I would have to turn down that.
Yeah.
Can't be seen fraternizing with the enemy.
We're trying so hard to model, just discussion.
But I'm curious, Andy, as a Christian, as a Catholic, I believe, how do you think about the concept of veganism? Is there room in your theology for it, or is there a counter theologically that you've got to it?
Yeah, I think it needs to be stated first off that Christianity does not mandate, eating meat. This isn't something that, for all Christians out there, it's not something that our religion mandates, right? And I think that we actually have a response, because I would agree with Eric that, I've been told this too, that, in the eyes of God, we do as humans have a special place. We are entrusted with this responsibility of being stewards over the land and over the animals. Mm-hmm. But for me, I just don't see how, there's really two paths here. The first would be, I don't see how it follows from being given stewardship over the land and animals that therefore it becomes okay to en masse breed them into existence for the sole purpose of killing them and chopping them up for their body parts.
Well,
right? I just don't see how that follows.
There is a really interesting exercise that I did back in undergrad. I went to a Christian school and I had an entire class, an entire semester's worth of class around this topic, around stewardship versus mastery of creation. And my professor at the time asked all of the students in the class to line up across the room. On one hand, we were gardeners, we were stewards, we were to protect and not master or, submit, like bring the world into submission. And on the other end of the room, it was, hey, you are the masters of this universe or this earth. You can do whatever you want to it. God has given you the permission to do that. And he was like, all right, go line up. Where are you? And I was closer at the time to stewardship and, the gardener concept. But everybody in that class was spread out across the room, right? And it was a spectrum, but there were definitely people who interpret that verse and that ordinance to go forth and multiply to mean go make everything else subservient. So I do see where you're coming from. And I think that if we were to talk about just the global impact of that particular theology, I would agree with you more than the other. But there really are quite a few Christians who interpret that very much to mean we can do exactly what we want with everything else on the earth.
Yeah. When I have these conversations, because I do have these conversations with my, fellow Christians a lot, and it can be kind of, it's a lot of like diving into the scriptures and kind of trying to, parse out what we're reading here. A lot of times we'll go to the book of Genesis, like when, after the flood, God tells Noah to, that the creatures on the earth will be for him and his family. And I definitely understand. I just think it's for me, because there is no mandate from Christianity, coupled with the fact that we have no good reason to be doing these things that we're doing to animals. I don't see how the other side comes to it.
So Andy, can I ask you a related question?
Yeah, sure.
Just while we're talking about God and veganism.
Yeah.
Do you view God as moral and maybe, the things God wants as moral?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. While you were talking to V, I pulled out my own Bible and I turned to Leviticus because I know that there are tons and tons of offerings. If you go to Leviticus, let's see. Geez, I started in Leviticus 2 and I moved through 4 and I think it keeps going, but different sacrifices to make at the altar. And these are animal sacrifices. Has God changed his mind about sacrificing animals? Like, or actually specifically, let me ask you, because that's not a good question. Can I rephrase that?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Did God approve of animal sacrifice?
Yes.
Okay. Is what God approves of moral?
Yes.
Okay. Does that make animal sacrifice moral?
It made animal sacrifice as part of the old covenant. I would say moral for sure. If we're talking about in a modern context, it may. But when we're talking about veganism and we're talking about factory farming,
so I totally understood. I totally understood the whole factory farming thing. I think is a related issue as well, but not the topic of this question in particular. The thing is, you said what I thought you were going to say, and I wasn't trying to make this a trap, but I was trying to highlight an issue that I've had in the past. And you said it's not the case anymore. It's part of the old covenant. So for people who don't speak Christianese, the idea is that after the Exodus, Moses wrote down a whole bunch of laws, and you can see those laws in the book of Leviticus. And those Levitical laws are the ones that people point to. A lot of atheists point to and say, you shouldn't sow different seeds in the same field, which has been used to propagate
I mean, it is
Right.
my
You
favorite
shouldn't.
scene in West Wing ever. I mean,
You shouldn't wear mixed fabrics. You shouldn't eat shellfish and things like that. And so, fast forward to the New Testament, the idea, and by the way, when you do something wrong, you need to make a sacrifice and penance. And so, in the New Testament, the idea is that Jesus' death on the cross is an ultimate sacrifice that gets rid of everything. And so you don't have to worry about any of it ever anymore. And so when people say that's the old covenant, that's what they're referring to. So I just want to make sure that people who are non-believers their whole lives are following this and going, what are they talking about? They're referring to pre-Christ exoneration of, bad behavior, sins, uncleanliness. Those kinds of things.
also ties into dispensationalism, and also could be argued to be kind of anti-Semitic.
It definitely, but that's another topic
That's
for
another
another day.
topic.
Andy, are you saying that God changed his mind?
No, I wouldn't say that he's changed his mind.
Okay, so is animal sacrifice still moral?
Is animal sacrifice still moral? I would say that animal sacrifice can be moral, in the sense that if we're looking at a culture in our modern world that if we're looking at a culture somewhere, in our modern world that for them, part of their, I guess, I'm trying to figure out how to
No
phrase
worries.
this. I'm saying that it wouldn't be moral. I don't see how it could be moral for someone like me or you, but I wouldn't make a blanket statement that it couldn't be moral in terms of.
Okay, that's actually
it couldn't
really
be moral in terms of somebody else.
That's really, really interesting. Andy, I think that'd be really fun to, go over a couple of times, because the next question after that, and I feel like I'm going to be loading things on. So really what I'm doing is giving you something that you can, look at in the future is, so it sounds like you're saying that morality is context dependent.
Morality is, I would say that there is an ultimate objective morality, but that.
Okay, so then the reasoning you gave earlier then doesn't really make sense, because it sounded like you were giving a context wherein animal sacrifice is still moral.
Well, I would say that someone's interpretation, it wouldn't be. I would say someone's interpretation of that objective morality. It may not be my place to go to them and say what you're doing is immoral, right? That's the ultimate point I was trying to make.
Understood. Hopefully, maybe I would love to loose you from the guilt and shame of the how dare you make a judgment about a thing that you're not involved in, because when you're talking about morality, especially when you come from a perspective where morality is something that is independent of context, I don't think you can hold those things in your head. I don't think you can hold both of those views at the same time. I think they conflict with each other. But I'd love for you to call back with, your take on it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll definitely be listening over this call later. Kind of have some food for thought. Let me just say before you guys let me go. It is Pride Month this month, right? And the Catechism of the Catholic Church tells us that when we're interacting with, say, members of the LGBT community, that as Catholics we should be accepting members of this community with with respect, compassion, and sensitivity. Those are words of the Catechism of the Catholic Church, and it says this because. I promise this is going to wrap up quick. It says this because we know that in Jesus' lifetime, he was constantly reaching out to individuals on the margins, right? He was constantly doing this. And in my opinion, I would include animals. Within that group of marginalized individuals, I think we have to include animals in that, and that they are deserving of our respect, compassion, and sensitivity as well. And that's just, kind of the position I'm coming from.
That was an interesting roundabout.
There's a lot to unpack there.
There was so much scenery.
You need to call back so that we can unpack that.
Please call back.
That is like
Andy.
12 calls worth of unpacking.
That is really that is interesting for sure.
All right, guys.
All right. Thank you for calling in, Andy.
Bye, guys.
Bye. I was like, wow, this sounds, did I just get called an Andy?
No, just in the same bracket. That's all.
It's fine.
No, it's
and like, I don't necessarily disagree with a lot of what he said, but that was a weird bracket to fall into.
It was a weird
Andy.
transition.
That was, I mean,
but
he tried though. He tried that transition, that being timely, like, kudos, I guess. Hats off to, thinking about the theme of the episode and of the month.
Absolutely. And truly, honestly, what we see in the history of religion is that religion changes with the people, because that's what it is. And so seeing that change is really interesting. And it's not like, there are a lot of atheists that will try and steelman any Christian who says, well, you have to be homophobic if you are a Christian. And they wind up creating this straw man and then attacking it. And you're not doing any good, and you're not doing anybody any favors by doing that, because just because it may not make sense with a literal interpretation doesn't mean that every Christian takes a literal interpretation. And if you try and force them into that, you're attacking a straw man, and you have just walked right away from the conversation.
Mm-hmm. There's also, there was a conversation that I had on Twitter earlier in the week where some online Twitter Christian apologist was like, it's so funny how atheists assume that fundamentalists are the correct version, when actually fundamentalists are just trying to fit their worldview into the Bible. And I'm like, yeah, I know.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
They're so close. They're so close.
It's so close. I was like, there is no correct Christianity. Every single version of Christianity that is around today would be nobody from 100 CE would know what the fuck was going on. And every single version is people trying to fit their worldview into a book. And there could be versions that maximize harm, which are worse to me, or versions that minimize harm, which, hey, we can be allies in some things. Hooray, that's great. But there is no correct version of Christianity. There's just Christianity. And if you call it, that's the problem when you say anyone can be a Christian, you get a whole bunch of people calling themselves Christian, and that waters down that pool pretty quick.
And for people who are playing Skepgen Bingo, which we have
a Skeptic bingo
link in the live chat. I know our mods are totally ready for that, which is amazing. But that leads to the No True Scotsman argument, which we can talk about more another day because we've got lots of calls and not a lot of time.